At 3:17 a.m., 9 Ukrainian FP-2 strike drones dropped out of the dark over a rail line in occupied Crimea, running at 140 kilometers an hour from 2 different heights, closing on a Russian military freight train as it rolled onto a steel bridge. The train was carrying fuel and equipment for the front, a single run worth days of truck convoys. 9 drones had been sent to end it on the bridge. In the lead cab, the driver could see the bridge's own gun already at work, drones burning and falling out of the sky over the span, one after another. It looked like the gun was winning, like the whole attack was dying on the bridge. It wasn't. 4 more FP-2 drones were already in the air from a second launch site kilometers away, well outside the bridge gun's reach, doing nothing but waiting. And the one move that would save this train on the bridge was the same move that would leave it slow enough to hunt. The 2 groups had lifted off a little over an hour earlier from 2 mobile launch cells on Ukrainian-held ground to the south. Each carried the same machine, the FP-2, a fixed-wing strike drone, a 6-meter wingspan, 215 kilograms, built to fly 200 kilometers and put a warhead through a target in the last mile. Unlike the deep strike drones before it, this one could correct onto a target that moves. A building sits and waits to be hit, a train does not, which was the whole reason the FP-2 had been chosen and why 9 of them were now running the first route, low and direct along the rail line. 4 more flew a longer offset line, then throttled back and held 6 to 8 kilometers behind, a reserve nobody on the Russian side knew was in the air. Well back from both sites, a Crimea control cell watched it all through the drone's thermal cameras, the locomotive's hot engines, the rail drawn in heat against cold ground, the bridge coming up ahead. A single truck-mounted ZU-23-2 guarded the crossing, a twin 23mm anti-aircraft gun, 2 barrels, an effective reach of 2.5 kilometers, elevation enough to fire almost straight up and a practical 400 rounds a minute. Against slow, low, fixed-wing drones, it was exactly the right weapon, sitting over 1,000 rounds ready. And this should have been easy. The 9 had not come in as one mass. 4 climbed and ran in high and oblique, 5 stayed low and level, hugging the rail line toward the locomotive. The gun could hold 1 clean bearing at a time, and it went for the high 4 first, the loud, bright, obvious threat, and killed them, one after another, in a few seconds of hammering fire. Swinging the barrels down onto the low 5 cost it a second, maybe 2. A second is nothing. At 140 an hour, an FP-2 crosses nearly 40 meters in that second, and the low group used every meter of it, driving in under the guns as the barrels came round. Even so, the crew caught 3 of them low over the rails and tore them out of the air. A 4th walked into the fringe of a burst, lost a control surface to fragments, and slewed away into the dark, gone before it reached the bridge. 8 of 9, and the train was not yet halfway across the span. Somewhere over 200 rounds gone, and the gun crew had earned every kill. 1 drone was still flying. The locomotive had touched the bridge at 3:17 and change. 400 meters of steel, a train doing 55. From the moment the engine rolled onto the span to the moment the last car cleared it, the crossing gave 46 seconds. Inside that window, the last FP-2 lined up on the front of the locomotive and started down. In the cab, the driver did the only thing a man can do with a machine that cannot swerve. He threw the train into a hard brake, and the whole consist dragged down together. He knew why it might work. A drone this size aims for where the locomotive is going to be, not where it is. Bleed the speed off, and that predicted point slides backward, 20 meters, leaving the drone pointed at empty track. The last drone corrected, its camera still on the hot engines, and tipped after them onto a steeper line, straight into the bridge's steelwork. For half a second, the truss strobed across the seeker, and the drone flew 19 meters blind. Stacked on the 20, the brake had already stolen. It came out a fraction low and late and hit the girders. not the train. A flat crack, a ball of fire, burning debris falling past the rails as the locomotive rolled on underneath, untouched. Kilometers to the south, in the primary control room, the last bridge feed flared white and dropped to static. 13 cameras down to 4. On the screens that were left, the train was still moving, but the heat shape of it had slowed to a crawl along the rail line. 9 drones spent and the train alive. And the operators could already see what the driver could not yet feel. How slow it was now, and how far it still had to run. In the cab, for one breath, it felt like winning. Then the driver felt the train sag beneath him and understood what he had traded. He worked the controls and got nothing back. A loaded train claws its speed back over 4 to 6 minutes, not seconds. Ahead, the rails ran clear, and he could not get to them. The air brake had done exactly what it was built to do and left the locomotive crawling. The train had 4 minutes. Behind the bridge, the Zu-23 was still hot, still loaded, still holding most of its ammunition, and already useless. Its truck fired from a standstill, posted to guard the crossing, while the train it protected rolled out the far side of its circle down a line no road ran beside. To follow, the crew would have had to stow the guns, move, and relay on a locomotive already kilometers gone. In 4 minutes, the train would be 4 kilometers down the line, and the gun would still be at the bridge, barrels on empty rails. That was the moment the 4 drones nobody had counted stopped waiting. The operators split them across the train, one for the front engine, one for the rear, one for the fuel, one to draw whatever fire was left, and swung all 4 off their holding line toward the rails. Every command reached them a beat late down the link, and each correction landed just behind the train they were chasing. A fixed-wing drone cannot pivot in place. The 4 had to swing wide and curve back onto the rails, and from 6 kilometers out, that cost them most of a minute. The only break the train would get. The bridge fight was over, the hunt was on, and the target was crawling. The moment the bridge was behind it, the crew released the brake and began the slow climb back to line speed. The needle crept. 32, 35, 38. Behind it, coming up the same rails at 140 against the train making 35, the 4 FP-2s ate the gap at 105 kilometers an hour. 7 kilometers of track, 4 minutes to a race. And the train needed at least that long just to get its speed back. The drones would close the distance before the needle ever climbed there. On the bridge, the hard brake had already spent the train's half of the race. In the cab, the crew felt the locomotive gathering under them, far too slowly. On the primary feeds, the gap between the drones and the last car shrank frame by frame. Both sides were racing the same clock now, and the train was losing it. The train was not defenseless. On a flat car at the rear rode a security team with a cord, a 12.7mm heavy machine gun, a 2-kilometer reach, better than 600 rounds a minute. It had been no use on the bridge. Its arc pointed back down an empty line while the drones worked the front. Now the hunt was coming up from behind, and it finally had targets. The gunner found the nearest shape in the dark, the one already lined up on the rear cars, and stayed on it. He had seconds and knew it. 1 belt. No time to reload before the rest arrived. At 600 meters, he opened up, and the lead drone flew straight into the burst. 12.7 broke it apart and dropped the pieces down the embankment. Then the gun ran dry. A cord feeds from a 50-round belt, and at that rate of fire, 50 rounds is under 5 seconds. 5 seconds bought exactly 1 drone. Kilometers back, a feed jumped white and cut out. 3 drones left. The operators did not slow for it. They swung the 3 off the axis the gun still covered, out toward the flanks, and told them to run.
None of the 3 came straight up the middle. A fixed-wing drone cannot stop and pivot. It flies arcs, and these 3 arced out along both sides of the train, drawing level with the rear cars, then the middle, then the head,
and there the cord was finished. As they ran up his flanks, the train's own 300 meters of freight cars slid into the line between the rear gun and the drones, and the cars nearest the fight were loaded with fuel. To reach the drones now, the gunner would have had to fire straight down his own train through his own tankers. He held all three in his sights, closing on the engines, and had nowhere to point. They flew up past his flat car and on toward the head of the train, close enough to see, and the gun that had killed one of them could do nothing about the other three. The three came in spaced a few seconds apart, each leading its aim on the still rolling train. The first came in on the forward quarter, past the arc the rear gun could cover, and hit the front of the locomotive. It did not stop the train. On the feeds, the front section bloomed white and went dark, and still the heat shape crawled forward. Because the two TE-116 is two locomotives coupled into one, two powered sections of 3,000 horsepower each, and the rear one kept pulling, hauling the whole consist on half its power. For a few seconds, the train actually gained, the needle climbing, the gap shrinking, the recovery almost winning. So the operators put the second drone onto the rear section. With both engines gone, there was nothing left pulling at all. The slack ran out through the couplings, car by car, and the train ground down toward a dead stop on open rail. That left one drone and a stopping train. In the control room, the operators watched the heat shape settle and go still, both engines burning, and sent the last drone not at the dead locomotive, but at the fuel, a tank car near the head of the consist. Everything a thermal seeker is built to find. No brake could shift it now, no gun could reach it. The drone lined up on the top of the car and came down. It struck with a dull, unremarkable thud, and for a heartbeat, that was all it was. Then the dieseling caught, all at once, and the whole car went up and threw fire down the line into the cars around it. The fire did not need help after that. Burning fuel ran under the cars beside it, and what had been a working rail line became a wall of heat no crew could get near. The corridor itself shut down, not by the loss of one train, but by a blaze nothing on the embankment could reach. At 3:23 in the morning, a locomotive, its fuel, and the line it ran on were burning together on an embankment in occupied Crimea.
The train did not die because a defense was missing. Every defense it had worked. The bridge gun killed 8 of 9 drones and drove the 9th into the steel. The air brake saved the locomotive on the span. The rear gun killed the first drone that came for the kill. None of it could do the one thing the moment demanded. The gun could not follow the train off the bridge. The brake could not give back the speed it spent. And the 50 rounds in the cord ran dry 3 drones short. The move that saved the train was the move that killed it. The hard brake that beat the drone on the bridge left the locomotive slow enough for the 4 that had waited. 13 drones, each costing less than a truck, went into Crimea for one train. The trains are still running. The next one is already loaded.